Hello beer nerds, this is Ryan with Beer by the Numbers, and honestly, Milkshake IPAs have always been a confusing beer style for me. If you've watched my History of Milk Stout video, you already know that milk stouts were invented essentially because the people in the UK loved their stouts and were trying to make the beer they loved a little bit more nutritious by adding some milk. This leap in beer styles seems pretty logical to me, as both milk and beers are heartier beverages that can pack a lot of flavor, but I don't see nearly as strong a logical link that inspired brewers to add strawberries and vanilla beans to an IPA. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm not really a huge fan of Milkshake IPAs. So far on the channel, I've only really covered the history and profiles of styles that I enjoy. Kolsch's, IPAs, and stouts are all beers that I really love to talk about, and as I type this script, I can kind of feel my enthusiasm waning. So this video is going to be a bit of an experiment for me. We're going to see if diving into the history, brewing techniques, and trying a few beers will change my opinion of this style. Perhaps by making this video, I too can learn to love the Milkshake IPA. So if you're excited to dive into this strange enigma of a beer style, leave a like down below and let's get started. You know, for a guy who drinks beer in exchange for ad money, I'm actually kind of nervous about the flight of beers I got laid out today. Hey beer nerds, it's Ryan with Beer by the Numbers, and I guess I have to do some Milkshake IPAs. If I'm perfectly honest, I don't really know how this flight of beer is going to go. This isn't really a style I enjoy drinking. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and get it over with. First thing I have is the Malted Milkshake IPA from Full Sail Brewing, and they are out of Hood River, Oregon. And this beer is actually nationally distributed, so if you're on the lookout for a Milkshake IPA, you want to try one of the beers I've had on here, this one is probably going to be your best bet. And already, I don't really know what to think. It just says hazy and hoppy, but at the same time it says Malted Milkshake IPA. But anyway, this thing is apparently flavored with vanilla, 6.8% ABV, and already I see a little bit of live yeast or some sort of scuzz at the bottom of this thing. But yeah, it says from Full Sail, thick and creamy milkshake style. So I guess let's pop it open and get into it. You know, as far as the branding goes, I kind of like it. Their bottle cap, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick this up on camera, but has kind of a hop cone with some soft serve ice cream on top with it, which is interesting. And I open it up and I smell the aromatic hops right away, which I think is a hallmark of this style. And then the pour, it comes out, you know, pretty hazy, but as far as like the boundary of hazy IPAs is concerned, I don't think this color is quite pushing it. You know, I can almost see, you know what, I can't see any of my fingers through the glass, but it's almost there. I can see a little bit of light coming through it. So it's not truly opaque, but it's got a beautiful dense white head on it, about 2 fingers, and the aroma is just all citrusy hops, but I do get that slight hint of vanilla. I'm not really sure how I'm going to react to that slight hint of vanilla, but seeing how this is one of the few Milkshake IPAs I've ever had, maybe I'll really enjoy it. Yeah, so diving in straight away, not a lot of malt flavor at all. Immediately comes through with the bitterness and definitely getting a lot of that citrus still on the nose. There's just the subtlest hint of vanilla bean in here, which is pretty good. I don't really know if it's bringing much at all, if anything, to this beer. It just kind of seems to be there in the background. It doesn't really want to play a huge part. You know, I am getting a little bit more sweetness than I would normally expect from an IPA here, though. which is pleasant. It's not really malty sweetness. It definitely has more of that milkshake kind of feel on the back end. As far as the body goes, I do kind of get the creamy body out of this beer. I wasn't really sure what to expect when I poured it into the glass because it didn't really look all that thick. It didn't pour out like some big thick stout or anything like that. So I wasn't really sure if it was going to deliver on the body, but yeah. It's definitely bringing a little bit more body-wise than a regular IPA. And you know what? I might actually let this warm up a little bit, come back to it, and see if we pick up more on that vanilla. Because that might be one of those flavors, like in stouts, that you really can only get a taste for once the beer has warmed up a little bit. So we're gonna come back and give final judgment on this one in just a moment. With some of the beer history videos I've done, it's been pretty hard to pin down an exact person or brewery who was responsible for inventing a new type of beer. IPAs evolved from pale ales because British brewers just gradually kept making their pale ales hoppier. Lagers emerged from brewers in the mountainous regions of Central Europe, storing their beers in cool caves at higher elevations. And porters and stouts still exist on this continuum of confusion with no steadfast rules separating the two. But milkshake IPAs are still pretty new, and their origins have not yet been obscured by the sands of time. So today, we turn our beer nerd focus squarely towards one Swedish brewery, Omnipollo. Omnipollo is a brewery that is totally a product of the craft beer revolution. Beer is seen as a beverage for the common man in most cultures, and although most craft breweries are focused on making high-quality products, they try to market and price themselves at an accessible step up from a light lager and other macro offerings. That is not how Omnipollo operates. They are the extreme embodiment of the crazy experimentation and independent spirit that underpins the 21st century's beer revolution. Founded by a businessman turned brewer and graphic artist, this duo have continually pushed the envelope as to what beer can become. Even just going to their website, you can already tell that they are a different breed of brewers. Instead of just being greeted with the typical legal age drinking prompt, you're treated to a crazy kaleidoscope experiment and minimalist graphic forward website with almost no effort to actually sell you their product. A couple of beers available for purchase today include a Bacon Burger Imperial Stout brewed with over 50 kilograms of bacon, or a Popcorn Peach Sour brewed with maize and Swedish peach candies. The partnership of beer and artwork began in 2011, and even back then they chose the experimental name of Omnipollo, a combination of the words omnipotent and pollo, the Spanish word for chicken. So I guess it's not a surprise that a brewery this strange had a pretty long-run series of experimental brews, all of which they numbered. By experiment 400, they were starting to get really crazy, and with number 411, Omnipollo began making what they called smoothie IPAs. Wild strawberry, rhubarb, vanilla, and a ton of hops made this beer a unique blend of fruity, bitter, and slightly sweet that the boys at Omnipollo loved so much they knew they were onto something great. Just a few months later, in the fall of 2015, Omnipollo teamed up with an American brewery, Tired Hands out of Ardmore, Pennsylvania, to create another IPA similar to the popular smoothie IPA. This IPA was to be brewed with oats, wheat, and lactose sugar, and then fermented on a bed of strawberries and vanilla beans, and of course, it was hopped up to the max. They called this creation Milkshake, and with that, a beer style was born. Okay, so we just spent a little bit of time learning about the history of milkshake IPAs, and that they evolved kind of originally from this smoothie IPA that Omnipollo did. And that's kind of where this second beer falls into, is a little bit less on the milkshake side and a little bit more on the smoothie side. And this is Junkyard Brewing out of Moorhead, Minnesota, and their Technicolor Dream Wolf. And this is a sour IPA brewed with lactose and fermented with tangerine puree, and then dried hopped with Cryo Citra and El Dorado hops. I don't know what Cryo Citra refers to. I might actually have to Google that after I finish recording this. But yeah, this one is definitely going to be heavy on the fruit flavor, I think, but definitely still has that milk lactose sugar that we'd expect to find in a milkshake IPA. And of course it comes in a big crowler, so I guess I'm going to be rolling after this one. 7.3% ABV. So yeah, we're gonna be rolling tonight. Ooh, that was a big pop on that crowler can. Let's pour this out. See, now this is what I was expecting more out of a milkshake IPA. This looks a lot more like fruit juice coming out of the can. Again, we get a pillowy, kind of dense head of foam. This one maybe 1.5 fingers thick. But yeah, definitely gives more of that opacity, more of that fruit juice kind of feel. So, and oh my goodness, this beer is just a tangerine bomb on the nose. Just no bitter pininess that you might get from a more traditional West Coast IPA. Just all fruit, and maybe even a little bit of that pithiness you get with some citrus fruits. That pithy bitterness is coming through too, but man, does it smell like a big glass of fruit juice. All right, I'm gonna dive in. Wow, so it's weird to me that milkshake IPAs can even come in a sour variety. I guess that kind of speaks to the crazy amount of variety this style can have. But yeah, this is really throwing me for a loop. I mean, I guess I'm glad that it's sour with this much tangerine in it, because all I'm getting from front to back on my palate is tangerine. You can get a little bit of that lactose sweetness for sure. And that, I think, stops this beer from being too one note, from really feeling like any other sour. Because yeah, the flavor is a lot more well-rounded, but again, I'm not really sure exactly how this is milkshake, and this is why I'm so confused about this style. Like, you know, these two beers we've tried so far, you know, they both have lactose, they both try to bring milkshake flavors, but they pick such like weird fruits that I don't normally associate with like an actual milkshake, and that's just where I get so thrown off. As far as this beer goes, definitely a sour beer, which is again kind of weird why it's a milkshake IPA. I don't know about any sour milkshakes, but I guess that's why brewers are a really creative bunch. Overall, though, I'm not really getting IPA. I'm getting more of just a sour ale with tangerine and a little bit of sweetness. But as far as drinkability, I would definitely drink this one. It's a really, really solid kind of sour, little bit sweet, and definitely fruity beer. Yeah, overall, I think I'd recommend something like this. I'm still confused about milkshake IPAs, even a couple beers in now. Perhaps even more confused than when I started. But yeah, I guess if this is what a brewer's churning out as a milkshake IPA, I could be about it. Cheers.
So for most brewers and your Cicerone crowd, a milkshake IPA isn't really an official beer style like those you'd find in their fancy beer judging guidelines. When pressed, a good majority of beer nerds would consider a milkshake IPA an offshoot of a hazy IPA, and it's pretty easy to see why. Like all IPAs, the milkshake IPA features prominent hop aromas and flavors, and that usually means a big helping of American hops. Centennial and Citra hops are extremely common choices, as these two hops bring a ton of aromatic compounds along with great tropical fruit flavors. And just like hazy IPAs, when you pour out a milkshake IPA into your glass, you're going to see that opacity that inspired the entire haze craze movement. Although in the past such a wall of color would indicate substandard brewing techniques, IPAs have completely changed that perception by using that haze to deliver superior flavor and mouthfeel. Speaking of mouthfeel, milkshake IPAs usually come with a thicker, creamier mouthfeel than their more traditional counterparts. The source of all that extra body leads us perfectly into how one brews a milkshake IPA, and you start with the grist. For those of you who aren't super nerdy amateur homebrewers like me, grist refers to all the malt and cereal grains ground up and used as the base source of sugar that ferments into delicious beer. While traditional IPAs use almost exclusively pale malted barley, as is common in many English ales, milkshake IPAs need to invite some other grains to the party to achieve that creamier body they're known for. About 30% of the grist used for milkshake IPAs consists of haze and body enhancing oats, flaked barley, malted wheat, and flaked corn. Some brewers even swear by adding a little bit of rice hulls to the mixture to keep everything smooth during the boiling process. Once a brewer has all their grains selected, it's time for them to hit it with some hot water in order to extract all those fermentable sugars that turn into beer in a process called mashing. Normally, you might not think too much of steeping grains in hot water, but there's actually a lot of very important decisions that need to be made. Temperature of the water is a big factor as it determines what happens to the sugars you're trying to extract from those grains. Skipping over a whole hour's worth of brewing science that we'll probably cover in a future video, for sweeter styles like milkshake IPAs, brewers want to shoot for a higher mashing temperature, something like 155 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Water chemistry is also super important and is often overlooked. Since we're shooting for a sweeter brew, we can make sure there's a good amount of chlorides in our water, perhaps as high as 200 parts per million, to limit any harsh, bitter flavors provided by the hops. And speaking of those hops again, we already know the varieties brewers like to use, but we haven't discussed when they like to use them. Generally speaking, the later you add hops in the boiling process, the less bitterness and more aromatics they impart. Since we want all those great hop aromatics to come through, most of the hops have to be added late in the boil, with maybe only 10 minutes or so left on that hour-long boil time. And you can bet partway through the fermentation that excited brewer is going to add some extra hops in that famous dry hopping process. Adding hops to an almost completed beer really brings a ton of aroma and contributes to that signature milkshake haze as well. And once they've gotten all the hops in there, it's time to add the final key ingredient, lactose sugar. Lactose is a really long sugar molecule that's most commonly found in cow milk, and when added to beer, it's a sugar that the yeast just aren't able to untangle. This means that any lactose you add is going to make it into the glass and add a nice bit of sweetness and creamy texture to the final beer. This ingredient is key to really bringing beer its milkshake namesake. But before we go any further and talk about all the fruit flavors, let's try another milkshake IPA.
Okay, so I've tried a couple milkshake IPAs already. I don't know if anything's been cleared up for me so far. I feel like I've enjoyed it somewhat, especially, beer number 2 with all the tangerine, but this last one, I think I saved it for last because I was not looking forward to this particular beer at all. This is from Big Axe Brewing in Nisswa, Minnesota. This is the Pina Colada Milkshake IPA. I don't really like coconut that much, so this is gonna be weird for me. I do appreciate on the can here this lovely message, freshest is bestest, keep cold, enjoy soon, which is like any great motto for an IPA. So let's dive into this one, get it out of the can. This one says it's got 55 IBUs, which sounds a lot more like an IPA than the last one we had. But again, it's not pouring quite as hazy as I would expect. Obviously, either I had a bad pour, or this one's very hard carbonated. On the nose, yeah, I get a ton. You know, I don't get a ton of coconut, but it's definitely there. So maybe I'll like this one a little bit more than I thought. And I definitely get some of that citrusy, pineapple-y, tropical fruit hop kind of vibe in here, which I guess makes a lot of sense for it being a pina colada beer. Yeah, another dense white head on these beers. I guess that's the main consistent thing of this style, other than color, which all seem to be, you know, a little bit past pale straw, kind of getting into that golden territory. But yeah, coconut, sweetness, tropical fruits, a little bit of hoppiness. This actually smells like a really, really balanced beer, so I'm going to dive into it. Okay, so maybe it's just the coconut, but this is definitely the sweetest of the three I've had so far, which I really think develops and rounds out all the flavors very nicely. The coconut is not overpowering, which I really appreciate. There is still quite a strong tropical fruit presence that I would expect to see in a Milkshake IPA. And yeah, it's a little bit clearer than I thought. And it definitely has quite a bit of hop bitterness on the back of the palate. And if this is what a Milkshake IPA is supposed to be, and it can get me to moderately enjoy a coconut-forward beer, maybe I think I might be starting to get what the deal is with this style. Yeah, because that bitterness plays really well with that sweet coconut one might expect in a pina colada, and it plays around with that tropical fruit, and they all kind of sing a lovely chord together. No one flavor is too dominant. Everybody's playing along really nicely, and yeah, maybe this is what Milkshake IPAs are all about. Maybe it's about combining fruits and flavors and bitterness that other beers just can't quite seem to bring together as harmoniously, and getting them all to work together towards one common goal. And if that's the idea behind Milkshake IPAs, this style might have more to teach me about beer than I originally thought. And that is the fun thing about beer. You can take a lot of little life lessons at the bottom of a pint glass. Oh, but don't think I forgot about beer number one here. I wanted to see if I could pick up on that vanilla anymore as it warmed up a little bit. And it definitely has warmed up a little bit, but not a lot of vanilla on the nose right now. And yeah, it's just not quite there. It's letting me down a little bit. But I have to say, the most traditional Milkshake IPA in terms of fruit flavors and bitterness and all that coming together to combine to make a beer has left me pretty stunned, actually. I didn't think I was going to like this beer at all, and yet I think it is my favorite of the three, which is kind of a surprise to say. So, you know what? I think I'm going to have to keep trying a lot of Milkshake IPAs going forward. And if any of you out there have had some Milkshake IPAs or have Milkshake IPAs to recommend to me, please leave them down in the comment section below. I'd really like to continue to dive into this style. This beer has really inspired me to keep going and keep going further now that I've gone through kind of the history and how the beer is brewed and why people, you know, combine these flavors in such a weird way. I think it's a really cool cool idea. And also in the comments, please let me know of any other beers you might want me to dive into this way. Are there styles that you don't particularly like that you'd like to see a little tasting flight of, along with some beer history and stuff? Let me know that too. And until next time, I'm gonna keep drinking Milkshake IPAs. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.